Welcome everyone, I'm Catherine, I'm the head bookworm at ShelterBox, and thank you for joining us for this ShelterBox Book Club event. So we've got Dr. Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai is an award-winning Vietnamese writer, poet and journalist. She is the author of 11 books of poetry, short fiction and non-fiction, and of course the author of the book we've been reading for the last 6 weeks, The Mountains Sing. Born in North Vietnam but raised in a poor village in South, Quế Mai has described in her characteristically poetic style how her mother nourished her with borrowed books and lullabies when food was scarce. As well as Vietnam, she has lived with her husband and 2 children in Australia, Bangladesh, the Philippines, Belgium, Indonesia, Germany, and now Kyrgyzstan, where she splits her time with Vietnam and from where she joins us this evening. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight, Quế Mai.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for your great introduction. And hi, everyone. Again, thanks for joining us. It's 11 o'clock at night here. So if I don't answer a question well, you know that I'm tired. But no, I've been writing on my 3rd novel the whole day today. So I'm really excited and I feel very energized to be with you. And I mean, to be selected by ShelterBox Book Club is such a great honor because ShelterBox has been doing such amazing work, you know, to help give shelter, emergency shelter for so many people in need. And by being a part of this book club, you support this great mission. So I'm so thankful to you. And ShelterBox has been doing amazing work in Vietnam as well. So many Vietnamese people are thankful to all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very, very kind. So I've got a first question to kick us off, and then we'll go to the wider group. You've spoken before about wanting to give voice to the people forgotten by the international narrative surrounding Vietnam. And I just wondered what from real life and from your experiences you drew on for this book, like what inspired it?
I mean, you know, I grew up without a grandmother. Both of my grandmothers had died before I was born. So my father's mother was killed in the Great Hunger in 1945, together with her youngest son and her brother. And for so many years, we didn't know where they were buried because so many people in our village were, you know, had died. So people didn't know where, you know, they were buried. So my father carried this pain inside of him for so many years. And then my mother's mother died, you know, due to childbirth. So I was always wishing to have a grandma. So as a child, I went to my friends' houses and I listened to their grandmothers. So I promised myself that one day I would write a book with a grandmother figure in it, so I would have a grandmother. So by reading this book, you really celebrate my grandmother's lives. You know, I interviewed my relatives about their lives, and I interviewed so many mothers, you know, so many grandmothers that I met in Vietnam. And you know, like the older generation of Vietnam holds so much within them, things that I can't openly talk about. For example, you know, the land reform, you know, like is a forbidden topic. And you know, as a writer, I feel like I have the commitment to honor the memories, you know, to honor the lessons that we have to learn from the past so that we can build a better future for our children and grandchildren. And, you know, so many people shared with me incredible stories, you know, about their families. For example, my really good friend Thảo, you know, told me that during the land reform, her grandmother had to run away with her 6 children. Her husband and brother were killed in the land reform, and she had to run away overnight with her many children. So when I listened to her grandmother's life story, I said, this is incredible. I have to fictionalize it somehow into a novel. So I interviewed so many people like Thảo and my relatives. So, you know, the many things that happen in the book are based on, you know, real life events, on the things that actually happened. For example, my own grandmother was killed on a cornfield because my father told me that during the Great Hunger, he and his sister was so hungry that his mother ventured into a cornfield to try and steal corn to save them, and the guard of that cornfield caught her and tied her to the corn plants, and she was too weak to break away, so she died there on the cornfield. And you know, I don't know the man who killed her, but I heard stories about him, and I invented wicked ghosts in the mountain thing, and I invented him with the intention to do terrible things to him, because I thought with fiction, you know, I can take revenge, I can do terrible things to people. But I found out that I'm not a violent person. And by writing this book, I learned that, you know, the circle of violence does not stop unless there is forgiveness. So I think by writing this book, I found forgiveness, and this helped me heal. Because, you know, I think for many years, I did not forgive the man who had killed my grandma. And by writing this book, I understood somehow that I had to find forgiveness inside of me to be able to move on. You know, like my parents went through so much, and, you know, there was things that they did that I never understood until I wrote this book, and I was able to have conversations with them, conversations that explain their trauma and their reasons for their behavior, reasons that made me feel resentful in the past, you know. But I think in writing this book, the conversations that I was able to have really helped me and my parents to come closer together as well. So I think I really hope for more forgiveness in this world, because I think we see so much hatred, so much resentment, and I really feel like that all of us are children of Mother Earth, you know, and I think we should love each other more and see each other in our full humanity, and forgive each other for our mistakes, and try to come together, because I'm really worried that one day, you know, the human race is going to make ourselves extinct, because we are going to do terrible things to each other, like nuclear weapons. You know, now we live in the risk of being, you know, killed by nuclear weapons, and that risk is so real, and it's terrifying.
Yeah, thank you. That's such an insight, and I think you can really read in the book that there's a truth that's in the words that comes from you, but also it's more than just that there's truth in the stories for your family, but it's a universal truth. One of our members described it as a really powerful anti-war book, but I think it's probably more accurate to describe it as like a pro-love book. Like it's actually drawing attention to the positivity in humanity, and the and like you say, in the power of forgiveness and the power of compassion. Yeah, thank you. What an answer. I'm going to be mulling on that for a while.
Yeah, you know, actually, I like to add on what you said, you know, about the anti-war message in this novel. Actually, when I was 8 years old, I was standing on my village field, and I was looking at the devastation around me. You know, like more than there's millions of Vietnamese who were killed in the war, and I grew up, you know, seeing so many people who had lost their family members, and so many people who had their family members missing and still missing, and you know, people who lost their arms and legs. And as a 8-year-old child, I was standing on my village field, and I was my village road, and I was looking around me, and I was, as a child, so innocent. I thought to myself, the human race would not be so stupid to wage another war. Just look at this. Just look at devastation. And we would not be so stupid as to cause this in another place, to another nation. But, you know, I was just so naive. I'm just, you know, now, you know, then gradually I know that there is so much greed, so much power, so much money involved in the war, you know, in a war. So people keep, you know, like finding reasons, you know, to cause wars. And that's the really sad things.
Yeah, no, definitely, I hear you, but I don't think it's naive to want a better world, and I think books and art in particular can inspire us to imagine that. So you're fighting the good fight.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm crying. I don't normally cry, but I think today I feel very emotional somehow, because knowing the mission of ShelterBox and you know, the support that all of you are having for the people who live in countries such as Vietnam. You know, I think if you live, for a lot of people who live privileged lives, you know, what's happening in other countries seem very far away. You know, it's like, I remember when I was in Vietnam, you know, sometimes I was watching things that happen in another country, you know, and I feel like, oh, this is so far away from me. It will never happen to me. But I think the world is so small, it's smaller than, you know, like the pandemic has proven to us that we are so connected. You know, what something that happens, you know, in a faraway corner of the earth can impact all of us, because we are part of this family, of this earth family.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, and don't worry, you can have all the emotions you want. We're interested in you in all of your facets. Okay, I've got a really nice question here from Jasper, who's asked, and actually I think we've got this question from someone else as well. Steph as well sent the same question in, asking what your favorite proverb is, because we love the book.
Okay. Proverbs. I grew up with proverbs. You know, my parents, you know, like love proverbs, for example. So let me quote two of my favorite proverbs. Trăm cái rủi có cái may. Good luck hides inside bad luck. So if I have a very bad day, I come home and I complain, and my mom would say, trong cái rủi có cái may, good luck hides inside bad luck, and I would immediately feel better. And when I was growing up, you know, I have two brothers, you know, and the three of us were very naughty sometimes, and my father, you know, lost patience, and he would become really upset, and my mother would quote the proverb, mưa dầm thấm lâu, soft and persistent rain penetrates the earth better than a storm.
Oh,
you know, it's better that you kind of soft and persistent rather than being upset, you know. So my father listened to it and then okay, and then he became more patient with us. There's so many proverbs I can quote, you know, like
they're amazing.
Thank you.
And they bring such a great flavor to the book. I love it. You get like a real insight into like Vietnamese culture, and I think it really helps to understand the characters more and where their mind is at that time.
And I need to say that it took me months to translate these proverbs, because I wanted, you know, to preserve the images, you know. For example, there's this proverb, con nhà tông không giống lông cũng giống cánh. So, you know, it's similar to the Western proverb, an apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah.
But if I translate it like that, it doesn't capture the images, because like we are an agricultural country.
Yeah.
So, you know, like we have so that's why I translated the proverb as family members relate to each other, if not in feather, then in wings.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
because it's you know, these images are in the Vietnamese original, because
Yeah,
it's talking about all of the, like the ducks of the chicken, of the farmers. So
amazing. Gosh, yeah. And there was something we were saying yesterday about how we had a discussion about the book on Zoom as well. And one of the things we were talking about yesterday about the proverbs was how they give strength to the characters when they say them, because it's that sort of that wisdom passed down through generations that reminds you you're not alone in going through things. And we wondered if some of that, some of the strength that Dulan and her family have comes from that knowledge of those proverbs, and knowledge of the fact that previous generations have also got through really difficult times by learning this wisdom and using that for themselves.
yeah, that definitely, I have always told myself that, the strength that, I mean, Vietnamese people have gone through so many horrendous events, because we were occupied and colonized by so many stronger nations, so I mean, what helped us to survive is just like stories or wisdom passed from one generation to the next. For example, the oral storytelling tradition of Vietnam is really strong, and that's how we pass these strengths to each other from one generation to the next. And proverb is one form of storytelling, the oral way of storytelling. We also have like we have many lullabies that are sung from what by their grandmothers to their grandchildren, and mothers to their children. And in Vietnam, people still sing them, and we have many like folk tales, and there's some oral like oral poetry called ca dao. So they are stories which are written in the poetry form, and it's very long, and people remember them by heart and tell to their grandchildren, to their children as well. So definitely, storytelling is very important for our survival.
Yeah, and it's a tradition that you're then continuing with your books and your poetry, which is amazing.
Yeah, and that's my intention, to employ the oral storytelling tradition. If you notice, like the grandmother tells the stories to her granddaughter, and the granddaughter continues that tradition by writing down these stories and into a book, and in the end she burns the copy of the manuscript to offer it to her grandmother. So it's a circle of storytelling. So I just want to convey a message that this will not, this tradition will not die, because it will continue in a circle. Yeah, so I embedded many subtle messages into this book.
One of that's that scene, and the mirroring of the beginning and the end is already so beautiful, and with that added context, it's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got a question from Elizabeth here. So she's asked, is there still a similar divide between the North and South today as there was in the past?
So I need to explain about the division of Vietnam. So actually, that is a result of colonization. So when the French colonized Vietnam, they divided our country, so that we are not a powerful nation anymore, right? So I think that division continued during the war, and the Vietnam War further made the division stronger, because like we fought against each other. And so during the Vietnam War, Vietnam was divided into North and South, and we kill each other and did terrible things to each other. And so now you can tell the differences between North and South by the accent that we have. For example, I was born in North Vietnam, so I was raised with a Northern accent, and when I was 6 years old, I moved to South Vietnam, and there I experienced terrible discrimination. So like rocks were thrown onto our roof because people in the South, they said we were invaders, because like the people from the North was coming to the South, taking away jobs. So I remember when I was sitting down for dinner, that would be explosions above our heads, some neighbors, because we had no electricity at that time. It was dark, and people were just standing, outside our home and throwing rocks onto our tin roof. And during the day when I was like selling things on the street, and the neighbors would be laughing at me and saying terrible things. So I was really much bullied, and I think having experienced that, I was curious to find out the reasons for this discrimination, and that motivated me to learn, and that enabled me to write the mountain thing, because I think without that both the Northern and Southern experiences, I wouldn't have been able to write this book. So nowadays there are less problems, because Vietnam has been united since the end of the war, since 1975. So it's like 48 years now. It's better, but still, there are still some resentment between North and South still, and because of the differences in the accent. So you can say if the person is from the North or from the South. So sometimes you can be discriminated against if the Southerners go to the North and the Northerners go to the South, because people can for sure say, from which region you are. And but I think it's generally it's better now, and I just hope for one day we can all live in harmony, and respect each other for our differences. And I think with time and with the younger generation, things are getting better, but we still have a lot to do in terms of reconciliation. There are things which are not appearing on the surface in everyday life, but things which are buried deep inside because of trauma. And with trauma, people bury it, and it can't be healed. If they can talk about it openly.
Yeah. Well, I think you've told me about a few people who've been inspired by this book to kind of seek out and reconcile with their family. I wonder if you'll share that story with everyone, because it's beautiful.
Oh, I have two readers who have reconciled with their parents after reading the book, and both of them are diasporic Vietnamese. So one is Vietnamese American who was abandoned by her mom at birth. And later on, she found her mom, and no, actually, the mom gave her away when she was small to other people to raise her. And later on, she never forgave her mom, right? And then after she read my book, she reached out to me and she said, I just reconnected with my mom, because I never forgave her for giving me away. But now I reached out to her and talked to her, and I understand the circumstances why she gave me away, because I was inspired by Grandma Diệu Lan's action, and I could look back to my mother, what she did. And it was just so emotional for me to hear her story. It was just such a gift. And then so I met her in Los Angeles when I went there, and we just hugged each other and we cried like for so long. And also there's also a reader in London who's also you know, she's half Vietnamese, and she told me that she was very resentful of her father, who never seemed to be happy, you know, who always complained, like, and compared, like, if you know, so anyway, so she said that she didn't talk to her father for several years because she thought, you know, how come he's always, you know, very unhappy. And then after reading a book, she thought about what might have happened to him, because you know, he went through the war in Vietnam. And then she reached out to him, and she sent me pictures of them in a Vietnamese restaurant. And she said it was the first time that he showed her pictures of him during the Vietnam War and told him what had happened and why he was so traumatized. And he wasn't able to talk to her about that because he feared she couldn't understand, or because, you know, or that she wouldn't be interested. But after the book, because she could share with him what she had read and what Grandma Lan went through. And then he said, oh, this is similar to what happened to me. And he started to tell her, you know, about his family. And she told me, you know, for the first time, she understood, you know, the cause of his trauma. And she connected with him, and it's just so moving for me to see the pictures of them together, and having, you know, bowls of noodles, and talk about, you know, about his time during the war. It was just, I mean, you know, it's just so amazing. And I mean, it's also amazing for me, you know, to hear your thoughts as well. I mean, I went into the Facebook group for ShelterBox you know, book club, and I read your comments, and I was just like, you know, I hope I deserve your care, because, like, you know, and I think the best way to thank you is to write the next book, right? So every day, regardless of how busy I am, I have to sit down and I write, because I think there's so many stories that need to be told. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think one of the things that this book does so well is that really honest portrayal of trauma and the effects it has on people. And I think, as shown by those stories, that like, when we really understand each other, that's the way to move forward to reconciliation. So I think you're right. The more stories that are shared by you and I imagine many other amazing authors from Vietnam, then like, the closer we'll get to that really peaceful world. I think actually that's a perfect segue for you to maybe tell us about your next book, and when we might be able to get a copy, if you can.
Oh, thank you so much. So actually, I am very excited to share with you, you know, my next book, which is called Dust Child.
Oh, look at that.
That's the cover of the book, but the UK cover is a bit different because, you know, I don't have a sister, so I wanted to have a sister via book. So so this novel, Dust Child, has two Vietnamese characters who are sisters, who actually have to work as prostitutes to serve American soldiers during the war. So through my research, I found out that there was, you know, like hundreds of thousands of women who were impacted by the Vietnam War, and tens of thousands of them had to work in bars and brothels to serve American soldiers during the war. And tens of thousands of mixed children were born, and most of them were abandoned because these women didn't have a mean to raise them. So my novel centers on a Black Amerasian man. And Amerasian children were called children of the dust because they were abandoned. So with this book, I want to prove that Amerasian, those mixed people, that deserve our love, our care, our respect. So I have a Black Amerasian character, and because a lot of American men have written in the viewpoint of Vietnamese women. So with this book, I do a crazy thing. I write in the point of view of a traumatized American veteran who was a helicopter pilot during the Vietnam War. So to write the scenes with helicopters, I had to study helicopters. I had to read a lot of books. I had to interview a lot of helicopter, crew members. So I had a lot of fun writing this book. It's my result of my PhD thesis with Lancaster University in the UK. So it took me almost 7 years, and I thought I was crazy to write in the viewpoint of an American man. but actually, so I'm so glad that people who have read the book felt moved by it. I mean, I also cried a lot writing it as well, and the ending shocks me. The ending totally shocks me. I need to tell you that I never could plan for my book when I write them, because I need to be surprised as a writer. I feel like if I'm surprised when writing, my readers will be surprised. So I did not envision the ending of The Mountain Sing when I wrote it. I had no idea what would happen. So in the Mountain Sing, I had the idea of writing this epic account of Vietnamese story with a grandmother and a granddaughter. And I collected so many stories, but I didn't know how to open the door to that world until one day I was traveling in the car. I was living in Manila at that time in the Philippines, and I was traveling in the car to go to kick pork chop self-defense. Okay, if you read the book, kick pork chop, I studied it. That's why I know how to kick pork chop. I studied it for 2 years with a master, and one day I was traveling in the car with a friend to go to this kick pork chop class. I asked my Vietnamese friend what happened to him during the war, and he told me in 1972 when Hanoi was bombed, his grandmother protected him from the bombs because his parents had gone to Russia to work there. So I mean, I was so moved by his stories that that night after coming home, after cooking dinner and putting my kids to bed, I sat down at my writing desk. It was 9 p.m. I remember I was exhausted, but I Googled the bombings of Hanoi, and I could listen to the sirens. I could see the images of people dead from the bombings, and with tears running down my face, I wrote the 2,000 words that night. That would become the first chapter of The Mountain Sing. But after that, I interviewed like more than 20 people who witnessed the bombings to be able to refine the chapter. But that night I wrote 2,000 words, and I did not know what would happen to Grandma Diệu Lan and her granddaughter Hương, and I put myself in the position of Hương. So I did not know what happened to them. So until I finished the book and I found out the ending, and I said, oh. And with this novel as well, Dust Child, I started it. I wanted to have these characters. I did not know what would happen to them. And the end totally shocked me. Shocking. I can't tell you, but yeah.
We'll have to get our own copies.
But it's very realistic as well, because in The Mountain Sing, because there are unresolved issues like Hương father doesn't come back
Yeah.
I hope you finished reading the book because
Yeah, no, don't worry, we have.
So Hương father doesn't come back, and it's the reality faced by so many Vietnamese people. Now we still have hundreds of thousands of people still missing during the war. And every day there's still notices of people looking for their family members 47 years after the war.
Wow.
Yeah, so so in that child also is very realistic as well.
Amazing.
Oh, I can tell you millions of stories of this book. Can I tell you something quickly?
Yeah,
I am actually, that child is inspired by so many real life stories. So at the moment, I am helping Amerasians in Vietnam who are looking for their family members. And recently, I have been translating for this Amerasian woman who's like 2 years older than me. She was born during the war, and she was given away. She was sold by her mom to a couple who exploited her as a slave. And recently she found her father via DNA testing. The father had no idea he had fathered a child in Vietnam because he was married. He went to Vietnam when he was married, and he had a one-night stand with a woman or with a bad girl, and she was pregnant with his child. And he actually did not do the DNA test. One of his nephews did the DNA test, and the DNA test, and then the nephew was contacted, say, oh, you have a relative in Vietnam, and say, huh? How come I have a relative in Vietnam? I'm in Ohio. And then the family had a meeting and said it must be him, the person, his uncle who went to Vietnam. And this man said, no, can't be me. So his daughter didn't DNA test and confirmed that she has a half sister in Vietnam. So the man did the DNA test and confirmed 100%. So he is coming back to Vietnam to see her for the first time. So I'm like organizing the trip. I'm finding the translator, organizing transport, like hotel. I'm doing it as a volunteer, and like it's taking it. But it's so emotional. I've been translating for them, and we cry so much every time because it's so emotional.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many stories like that, it's incredible. And that they found each other after nearly 50 years.
Wow.
I mean, it's so incredible.
That is amazing. Well, amazing that you were able to facilitate that reunion, and I really cannot wait to read Dust Child. It sounds amazing, and like it will continue the legacy you've created through the Mountain Sing of unearthing stories that are not really being told. So thank you. I'm really aware that it's like nearly midnight where you are, but you offered to maybe read a bit of poetry for us at the end. Do you think you'd be interested still?
I'm so awake. I feel like I just got up from sleep. My husband said, you are so excited whenever you have an event because, I know, because I love readers. So thank you so much, Catherine, for this amazing conversation. And I love speaking with you.
Oh, thank you. This has been amazing. What a joy. A real privilege.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your great questions. And I'm sorry if I didn't get to answer your questions, but I hope to connect with you in the future. But I need to read a poem I wrote for my mother. So in Vietnamese life, there is a saying, có những phút ngã lòng, tôi viện câu thơ và đứng dậy. In the moments of difficulty, I hold on to the verse of poetry and pull myself up. So that's the poetry of Phùng Quán, who was censored, I also wrote about him in The Mountain Sing. So anyway, so this poem is for my mom, whose characters really inspire the characters of grandmother Diệu Lan in The Mountain Sing. She's an orphan from a very young age, and her father was killed in the land reform, and but she really shows me that she forgives, and she moves on, and she loves, and she cares, and she never stops believing in human beings. So should I read first in Vietnamese or in English? It's a short book.
Vietnamese, please, and then.
Okay. Gian bếp của mẹ. Qua đôi mắt tuổi thơ tôi nhìn mẹ tôi vất vả trong gian bếp được dựng lên bằng rơm và bùn quánh. Mẹ nhấc đũa lên quấy nắng vào nồi cơm đang sôi. Vạt áo mẹ đẫm hương thơm của mùa gặt mới. Tay mẹ mớm rơm khô cho ngọn lửa đói bập bùng. Tôi muốn đến cạnh bên và giúp mẹ. Nhưng đứa trẻ trong tôi kéo tôi chui vào góc bếp tối thẳm. Từ nơi đó, tôi nhìn gương mặt mẹ dạy cho vẻ đẹp cách bừng lên trong gian khổ và cách hát cho cơm sôi bằng đôi tay rám nắng của người. Ngày hôm đó, trong gian bếp của tuổi thơ tôi, sự hoàn hảo được sắp đặt bằng những chiếc nồi đen tuyền bổ hóng và bởi chiếc lưng khom của mẹ mỏng manh, trống tránh sẽ biến mất nếu tôi khóc hay kêu lên. My mother's rise. Through the eyes of my childhood, I watched my mother who labored in a kitchen built from straw and mud. She lifted a pair of chopsticks and twirled sunlight into a pot of boiling rice. The perfume of a new harvest soaked her worn shirt as she bent and fed rice straws to the hungry flames. I wanted to come and help, but the child in me pulled myself into a dark corner where I could watch my mother's face teach beauty how to glow in hardship and how to sing the rice to cook with her sun-baked hands. That day in our kitchen, I saw how perfection was arranged by soot, blackened pans and pots, and by the bent back of my mother, so thin she would disappear if I wept or cried out. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to, sorry, I'm a bit emotional. Thank you to everyone who joined this evening. Your next book is on the way tomorrow. And thank you so much, Quế Mai, for joining us this evening. It's been truly a pleasure and a real privilege. Yeah, long may your writing continue.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I will be coming to the UK for the book tour of Dust Giant. So I will.
Oh, amazing.
I hope to see many of you and sign your copy of The Mountain Sing.
Yeah,
thank you.
definitely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for staying up so late for us. And yeah, I'll find out the dates and share that with everyone when you're in the UK. Amazing. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.